Welcome to The Current by TreasureCoast.com, where we discuss interesting people, places, and happenings on Florida's Treasure Coast.
Luke, thanks so much for being here. I really appreciate you coming in to talk and to represent AMG Pools. You know, we've been working together for a few months now, and there's a lot to talk about. I think, like we were just mentioning before the podcast, but not just technically about pools and what people should know, but also like a community-based aspect, and how what people here should know about it. Do you want to give an intro to yourself and AMG, and then we can go from there?
Yeah. So, hi, everyone. My name is Luke. I'm the marketing director for AMG Concrete Pools, and I have been for the past 3 years. And then the AMG story is a far longer one than just my tenure. So we started in
Yeah.
1987. Like a lot of businesses, started out of a garage and then developed and moved on into their own shop, and then so on and so forth into the facility we have now. But AMG has been a company that, from the moment it started, has kind of had those Treasure Coast roots. It was started by an individual who was a part of the community to begin with, and now Travis, the current owner, has lived here since he was about 10 years old. So these are people who really understand, I think, the larger sense of community, and when they're making decisions that affect their business, I think that's always a part of their mind. And it's been an incredible thing for me to see and come in, and sort of my first real work experience after graduating college, to have a business owner so heavily integrated into the day-to-day, but also so heavily integrated into his community. I mean, Travis, for example, he's on the fire board, he's on the licensing board, he's a part of the Boys and Girls Club, he's a part of Christmas for Kids. There's so many organizations that he gives his time to. And I think it's a great example for someone like myself who's coming, who is new, who's a new part of the Treasure Coast, and I'm sort of finding my footing here, to see what impact an individual can have, but also a business can have.
Yeah, I think that's very important. That's an important part to touch on is kind of leaning into those roots. I think can be a very successful way to. I mean, it's a successful way to grow the business, but it's also a successful way to kind of have your finger on the pulse of the community, on what's going on and what's important to people. And maybe that's something that has led to AMG being, where it's at, really one of the more prominent, if not the prominent, pool builder on the Treasure Coast. What do you think has led to that growth? And I know some of it, and a lot of it maybe was before you got there, but I'm sure you're aware of it. And where do you see it heading from there?
Well, I think you kind of touched on it, with being a member of the community allows you to have this inherent finger on the pulse, so to speak, of what is going on in the community. What is the sensibilities? What is the market feel like? Are people looking for a specific kind of pool? And I think the biggest and most recent example of that is when you look at the past 5 years, really. So if you mark from 2020 on, the influx of people who weren't part of the community, who had so many people from the Northeast, so many people from the West Coast, even the Midwest, moving to Florida. I think you had to have an understanding of where your starting point was and what that foundation was. So the leadership team here, being so heavily integrated, they knew what that existing Treasure Coast base is, the people who have lived here for 20 years, the people who have raised families, the people who have children in schools. So that allows them to contextualize, what is it like when someone moves here? What are the things that they look for? What are the ideas of the Floridian lifestyle that they're trying to kind of capture with this new chapter of their life? So when a lot of people move down from the Northeast, they're moving from colder weather, they're moving from a climate that's not nearly as enjoyable as this one is. So people tend to go, this is my time to get a swimming pool. This is my time to kind of create an outdoor space for my family. How do I go about doing that? So I think having that sense of people are looking to create these spaces, we always describe them as kind of like a canvas for future memories, because you're going to have a pool for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years. If you're going to move, or if you're in your forever home, like, they can expand even beyond that. So to create a space that's timeless, I think, is something that resonates with a lot of people, where we're not trying to capture a trend in the immediate moment, We're not trying to say, hey, this is what's big and flashy now. We're going to put it in your pool because that's what the industry is telling us. We think it's really important to have those conversations. And whether you've lived here for your entire life or whether you just moved here for the first time, getting a sense of what your aspirations are and kind of how you view your lifestyle amongst the Treasure Coast, wherever you are, whether that's Fort Pierce, whether that's Jensen Beach, Port St. Lucie, Martin County, all those areas, that all kind of dictates and plays a role in how you envision yourself being a Floridian. So if we can capture that in your outdoor space and make it feel natural and make it feel cohesive, that's what we want to do. And I think that's what's attributed to us having that kind of leadership status in the industry and in the area.
Yeah, I'm glad you touched on that, because that was one of my thoughts, was how homeowners, whether they've been here for a while or whether they've been here for just a month or a week, how these homeowners are influencing the way that I guess, your perspective. Because we have some overlap. When we've talked in the past, I've thought that myself. For us, we deal with people who, yeah, our kind of tagline is, whether you're here for a day, a week, or a lifetime, we give you the ability to live, work, and play and enjoy the Treasure Coast as much as you possibly can. And so it's those people that maybe they're moving down here, maybe they've lived here. And that's interesting to hear. I like how you highlighted as outdoor spaces as well, not just the pools, because there's so much. I mean, of course, the pool is the anchor, but for a lot of the content that you guys put out, for a lot of the stuff that you have, and the photography, the videography, a lot of the stuff that you show off, there's so much more to it than the pool. That is the canvas of a backyard that people are creating those memories in.
Yeah, and I think one of the biggest things is kind of the evolution of the space. I think if you looked at it even 10 years ago, it was kind of pool focused. Kind of everything else was kind of on the periphery. You weren't really paying attention to
Yeah.
how much deck space do I have? Where's my landscaping going to go? Where are my kids going to run? It was just, I want to be able to swim. Let's put a body of water in the backyard, and then everything else goes from there. Now, I think people have become more educated about their spaces. They've become more particular about their homes. Again, when you have people who are moving down here, they're bringing with them a lifetime of experience of different kind of architectural styles, different kind of aesthetic styles. Being able to
Yeah.
match those to a space has contributed to the way that the designs have changed. So I think more and more we are getting into this business of what is the entire outdoor space like? Are we adding fire features, and how do those get implemented? Because you have so many different implementations. And I think one of the great things about AMG, and I always make the joke that the guys here, the construction guys, the design guys, they make my job so easy. I get to go out and capture it at the end, but they're creating these impressive designs and they're created to such a high standard of craftsmanship that it doesn't matter if I'm shooting it from 2 inches away or from 200 feet in the air, it always looks good.
Yeah.
But they're taking into consideration, all right, this family has 2 kids. Those kids are ages 8 and 10. If we're going to do stepping stones, let's make sure that the gaps in between the stepping stones aren't so large that a child's foot can get caught in that and someone might get hurt. If we're going to do a fire pit, how large are those step risers down? If you have a young kid and those steps are a foot tall, like that's going to be hard for them to navigate. That might be tough. Those edges are sharp. They're usually clad in marble. Even the decking material itself. If you're someone who is 40 or 50 years old, you're moving in a certain kind of way, you can have a slicker kind of material on your deck because you're not going to be sprinting around. If you have grandkids running around as they do, you want to make sure that that deck has texture. You want to make sure they're not going to be slipping and sliding and falling. So those are why those conversations are so important. And it's a credit to the design team that we have here that they take all of that information, contextualize it in their experience, and then create a design that makes sense for that family, both in the current day and age and what they plan to do going forward.
Yeah. I mean, that definitely sets apart the custom build process from, I guess, like the boxed product, where it might not, maybe it doesn't fit, or maybe it fits for now, but maybe a year or two down the road, or what was overlooked. Those are kind of questions that might go unanswered. And I'm interested to hear, at least maybe from a preliminary perspective, or like a quick overview for people who are listening. how does a pool design process usually start, especially for like a custom pool? What are some things that homeowners should know before they call AMG to say, hey, look, this is something we're thinking of getting started? How does that flow usually work?
Well, I would say first and foremost, don't have any hesitation to make that initial call. A lot of us don't think about, I can say I certainly didn't think about what goes into a swimming pool until you decide to make that jump and you decide that you want to have one in your backyard. It's not something we see commercials for on TV. It's not something that we spend a lifetime reading about. They're pretty unique elements because they are these large investment pieces. They're generally, it's going to be your house and then usually your pool in terms of overall value.
Yeah.
So it's not an insignificant thing. You want to do the proper vetting. You want to talk to the right people. But I don't think you should be hesitant to say, oh, well, I don't know if I have the knowledge to have this conversation yet. There's always a place to start from. So the first and foremost thing, I would say make that call. Our design team are great at introducing you from the very beginning or taking someone who has a great idea and kind of making that idea realized into a proper vision. If you want to do kind of some base exploratory things, I always invite people to take a look at our website, but even take a look at sort of images of pools generally. There are things that are going to resonate with you just inherently, and you might not understand it, and that's okay. If you have a vision and you say, it's these 4 pools that I really like, and these 4 I don't like as much, I'm not sure why. Our design team can come into you and say, well, it seems like you're leaning geometric. It seems like you're leaning
Hmm.
minimalist. It seems like you really like raised water feature walls. Let's contextualize those elements in your backyard because every backyard is so unique. You have different property lines, different setbacks, different orientations. One design that might work even on your neighbor's home might not work in the same way for yours. So how can we take those elements that you really enjoy and bring them to your backyard in a way that feels cohesive? So that's a great place to start. And then from there, the process generally goes, for us at least, we're going to have that initial phone call, get those kind of preliminary pieces of information, find out about your family, find out about your lifestyle, find out about your home. We're then going to go out to the home itself to get a feel for the backyard space inherently. While we'll always take a look at surveys to help understand kind of what we're looking at from a data standpoint and from a legal requirement standpoint, there's certain things that a survey doesn't communicate. Things like drop-offs. If you have a canal behind you, what's the slope going down? Because we might have to build a footer on the backside to make sure that everything's level. If you've got a really large lot, how much space do you actually want to take up with the pool? Do you envision having the pool as a part of it, and then you're going to have a trampoline over off the right, and the kids are going to play football in the backyard behind that? If you have a small lot, do you want to create the entire lot as decking and pool area? And you want to kind of eliminate all of the natural grass and just make it turf or those kind of things. There's so many different approaches. Having that on-site vision really helps our design team get an understanding for that. From there, they create a tailored design, and then it's kind of a natural process back and forth. You're going to have inevitably some iterations that you want changed. You might really like the initial design, but hey, what if we move the water feature a foot to the left? What if those steps were a little bigger? You know, I just had my first grandchild. Can we get a sun deck area so they in a year are going to be able to sit in that and play in the pool as well? Those are all things that can kind of be adjusted on the fly. And from there, you do your material selection. So you figure out kind of, as we alluded to earlier, what materials make sense, both aesthetically and practically. And then we kind of take the ball and run with it from there. We get it in, we do all the permitting in-house. So there's no element that a customer has to go to the building department and discover that because that process can be complicated. So we take care of all that. The construction timeline, I'm incredibly proud of our construction team because they've gotten that down to about 6 to 8 weeks on the standard residential, which I think is going to be as fast as anyone will be able to build a
Wow.
pool.
Yeah, that's
And
unbelievable.
what that means, yeah, and I think the largest thing with that is the last thing you want, especially if you have kids, especially if you have pets, you do not want your backyard to be a construction zone for half a year. You're losing a part of
Yeah.
your home if that's the case. Because it is an active construction site. There are going to be times when rebar is just sticking out of the ground. There are times when it's a shell, but you've got a 6-foot hole in your backyard. You have to be careful around those spaces. You can't just go run around and play with it. So being able to move so quickly and being able to kind of give your life back to a customer and say, this is not something that you have to dramatically change your lifestyle for over the course of the next 6 months, the course of the next year. This is something that it's even within a season. We've had individuals who came to us in June and they're going to be swimming and it's still going to be warm out and they're still going to be enjoying that. So I think it's a great thing to be able to bring and to have that on our side. And again, it's a credit to the construction team, the in-house project managers, the in-house schedulers who every day are working on where can we find that extra efficiency? Where can we find that last degree to make this process not only more efficient, but more enjoyable as well?
Yeah, that is really, I mean, that's an unbelievable timeline. That's probably the shortest I've heard of. I mean, because you do hear, it is one of the industries where you do hear some stories where things go awry or things go longer than expected. And I mean, obviously, with a company with a reputation like yours, I would expect it to be shorter, but that's unbelievable, especially for a custom pool where you're kind of getting what you want. I wonder if there are any. Do you see any trends coming? I mean, not just. I mean, I guess on a national level, if there's cool materials coming up, or you had mentioned different styles people might be leaning towards just based on photos they like. Is there anything even on a local level that you see homeowners leaning towards?
I would say the largest thing is a real significant push over the last 2 or 3 years towards more geometric leaning design. And I think the reason for that is kind of like a lot of things in life. It all is cyclical. What was in style goes out of style, then comes back into style. I think you saw so many freeform kind of kidney bean shaped pools come about in the 90s and the early 2000s. And now with the real estate boom that we had and so many people selling their homes, those homes get contextualized as of a certain period because of those pools. So now
Yeah,
when people look at what's going to be timeless, what's going to make sense aesthetically, but what also, if this isn't my forever home, if I might be selling this home in 10, 15 years, what is something that's going to have more universal appeal? What's something that's going to leverage the space better? Because the toughest thing with a freeform pool, we essentially have to take that geometric rectangular space and then carve portions out of it to create that free flowing shape. So inherently, you're losing swim space, you're losing water, you're losing what could be deck material. So the geometric design is a little more utilitarian because it gives you that functionality back. But at the same time, I think it ages quite nicely as well. And it makes sense whether you have kind of an older style home, whether you have something that's new and it's sharp. There's different ways that you can implement those features because you're always going to have straight lines in your backyard. The house is going to be vertically raised. The house is going to have kind of a back horizontal plane. There's ways that we can match that and carry that out. I think it's such a credit to our design team. Every pool that they create feels like it was a part of the home plans, excuse me, from the very beginning. Like when this house was first constructed, this pool was the pool that was in mind. And sometimes that's the case. Sometimes the pool is being built 20 years after the home's been finished. So it's a credit to them to be able to see that vision, to see it interior, exterior. How are those spaces going to communicate? How are you going to be able to open all your doors and walk out and feel like it's just another room in a lot of ways? How are you going to have that language kind of make sense aesthetically? So, in terms of the national trends, I would say you're seeing people kind of embrace technology in a lot of ways. And that usually finds itself in automation systems. So, not having to walk over to your pool equipment, being able to have everything controlled from your phone. So, if you want to go in your hot tub, you can turn the heater on. If you want to turn the lights in the pool on, you can do that from your phone. If you want to have your fire features on, all those things then become so much easier to implement. And I think then if you're hosting, if you're entertaining, it's not this big arduous process of I got to go out to my panel. What sequence of buttons do I press? Did I press them in the correct order? Do all of my features work at the same time? Now it's all routed so conveniently. So that's really been embraced by the industry. But I would tell you the biggest thing when we look at Florida as an environment, when we look at the Treasure Coast as an environment, I think is sustainability. Because you have, on a more national level, really three types of pools. You have vinyl, fiberglass, and concrete. And the toughest part with vinyl and fiberglass is just the sun beats down on them so intensely here that you have this real issue with longevity where if you have a vinyl line of pool, that pool may last only 3 years before you need to replace the liner. And something like that, it's really a difficult process when you're saying, again, we just talked about those construction timelines, giving you your backyard back. If every 3 years you have to make this big reinvestment and then you have to once again have a crew come out, redo the vinyl, all those kind of things, same thing with fiberglass. I think people want to make that investment that has that longevity. I mean, you're looking at, with proper maintenance, you're not going to have to even consider doing any remodeling or replastering until about 12 years in with a concrete pool. So I think it's just better suited to the environment. I think we've seen more and more of a shift as we look at kind of the area data, we look at the permit reports, we see what kind of pools are being built. I think more and more you're going to see concrete pools really taking prominence in the space.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. I've seen those quite a bit, and it seems like that is kind of one of the benefits to the concrete space, not just from a longevity but a maintenance perspective. And it is interesting to hear some of those themes and some of the trends that you see coming on, because I think that that's a really interesting point when you tie it into how some of the pools that you create, they look like they were thought of from the original inception of the pool, even if it's decades after the home was built, because that's something that sticks out to me too. A lot of times there are so many different, and I obviously, this is an interesting, I'm not a design expert, but clearly there is a lot of thought that goes to it, because there's so many different trends, so many different styles that can go to it. And they always look like they do fit the space, like they fit the environment, the home, the setting. And I think that's always something interesting. It's always something that I think of when you talk about being entrenched in the community and listening to what's going on and what the homeowners need. It's an interesting way to tie those two together, to tie that with the trends and what people are becoming more interested in.
I think it's all conversational in a lot of ways. And I think
Yeah.
the trends and kind of the lifelong Floridians and what those things are, like, those inherently are two subjects that talk to one another and kind of inform one another in a lot of ways. We want, whenever a client comes to us, we want them to know every tool at their disposal, every material that's available to them, every feature that they could possibly implement. We often take the approach of kind of an initial over design in a lot of ways to say, here's everything that could be done in your space. What's resonating for you? What isn't? Then we can kind of pare things down from there. I think it's really difficult if you start at just the pure baseline and you say, I want a pool, I want it to be a rectangle. Okay, you put a rectangle in a pool. How does that speak to you as an individual? How does that kind of have a character that you have? Because if you're making the investment of a swimming pool, if you're going with a builder that is custom as AMG is, I think you want to make those considerations that make something your own. In the same way that if you go to a car dealership, you want a certain color of car, you want a certain kind of trim. It's not something that you generally want to just be good enough. And we don't really
Yeah.
exist in that space of being good enough. We want to be something that speaks to you on such an individual level to where when people come over, they know that this pool is your pool. They know that it's communicating in the same way that, oh, your kitchen has always been so beautiful. We love that your backsplash was this color. We brought that color out to the swimming pool. So those spaces communicate to one another. I think it's something that really allows you to express yourself in a lot of ways. And again, this is a place that you live. Every single day you're waking up, you're looking outside, you're seeing that pool. It should be something that excites you every day. It should be something that speaks to you every day. It shouldn't be something that you look at and then you say, I really wish we had a different tile. I really wish they had more options for the deck material. I really wish that we had a fire feature. Those are things that oftentimes aren't things you can go back and redo. If you make that choice at the
Yeah.
beginning, oftentimes
Right.
it's something that you'll have to live with from there. So that's why we want to take that process slowly. We want to have those conversations. We want to be in depth. We want to make sure that you see the widest breadth of what's available to you. So something you might not even considered because it was from a house that was larger than yours, or a house that was smaller than yours, or the lot was really wide in terms of horizontal space, didn't have a lot of depth. But something speaks to you. Maybe it's a turf layout of the deck. Maybe it's an interlocking grid pattern. Maybe it's a specific communication of a tile and interior finish. All those elements are things that we can replicate and then adjust to your space. So I think those are kind of the beautiful things to embrace. And whether you are someone who is coming from a different part of the country, coming from a different part of the world, and wants to kind of make your Floridian home indicative of that experience, or you're someone who's like, I want quintessential Floridian tropical environment. How do I create that aesthetic? How do I make it feel like it's been here for 20 years? I think our guys are just incredibly talented at making that happen and making those conversations flow in a way to where you feel satisfied and they have a great technical understanding of what it is that you're looking for.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It makes a lot of sense, and that resonates with me when you say something like things that I would not think of, but kind of bringing the personality of the inside of your house outside, not just the outside architecture, but if someone's walking, of course, they're going to walk through your home and they're going to walk out the back door or the back patio. They're going to look at the pool. They're going to look at that outdoor space, and feeling that flow or feeling how it all connects and communicates. I could see that being a pretty important aspect to the design team. And it's probably something a lot of homeowners overlook. And, you know, I guess that's a testament to the customer experience you guys bring to the table. But I'm also interested in, you know, we had touched on, I don't want to overlook some of the things we talked about with some of the organizations that you guys are involved with, or at least Travis is involved with. And I'm interested to hear, and this might be kind of in a broad question, but I like to ask this when I talk to businesses is what does success look like beyond the pools? You know, what does success look like, even if it's not measurable? What are some things that you guys look at on your end and you shoot for beyond, you know, building great custom pools?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind for myself is, are we a workplace that is employing people locally and creating sustainable lives locally? We are a company that prides ourselves on how many in-house employees that we have. We are a company that tries to avoid subcontractor use whenever possible. And that's in part because it gives us a greater sense of control over the projects and allows us to move with greater efficiency, getting those 6 to 8 week timelines. But that's also because there are members of this community who are incredibly skilled, in our case, are incredible craftsmen, incredible designers, incredible engineers, who deserve that opportunity to showcase what they're able to do and to be given a platform to create something and to be given a backing that provides for them and their families. I know Travis is incredibly proud. It's a beautiful thing that we have the ability to offer health insurance. We have the ability to offer 401k packages. We have an infrastructure that allows people to not only come in, clock in, do great work, provide that paycheck for that family, for their lifestyle, but also create something that's going to be sustainable for them. So when they get to the end, and we have so many employees who are 20-year tenured, 25-year tenured, people who have seen the entirety of AMG's growth, when it does come time for them to step away from it and spend time with their families and retire, and that next generation to move in, they're going to have all the support of so many years to be able to do that and not be someone who then has to go find the next job at 65 years old. At the same time, giving those new individuals a chance, because we know we have so many young people that are out there looking for opportunities in the workforce but don't know where to have it, have been taught sort of one specific path that they either have to go get a college degree and move away from the Port St. Lucie area, or they're going to be stuck in a certain position. We don't believe that to be the case. We believe there's real opportunity for growth. So when we have someone who's 19, 20 years old, they come in and we get them on an apprenticeship program as quickly as possible. We try to get them under the tutelage of those 20-year employees to where they can then create a sustainable career for themselves and they can move up, whether that's starting as a service tech and then becoming a service manager, then a coordinator, then an operations manager. These are paths that people have already walked. So we know it's real. We know it's something that can happen. And we want to make sure that's a cycle that continues. In the same way that you alluded to with Travis, and he really he's, I think, kind of the cornerstone and the lead for us, but he really inspires us to go out, find our own causes, find things that resonate with us in the community. For myself, I'm heavily integrated with the American Breast Cancer Society and the walkathons that they do each year and sort of those events as well. And that's something that it speaks to me because of my personal history and things that go on in my family. But he offers that encouragement. He offers that platform, that ability to go out and sponsor events that resonate with us. So whether that is something like the Boys and Girls Club, and again, reinvesting in our youth, making sure that they have career paths, both to go and expand their horizons, whether that means leaving the state of Florida or if they want to reinvest themselves into the community here, something like the Humane Society, and making sure that our stray population is taken care of, and making sure that when a dog goes to a home, it's a great home. And when an animal has an opportunity to have an owner and have a family and a loving environment, they can do so. And they're not just kind of left to fend for themselves. Something like the Christmas for Kids organization, where you have every Christmas, Travis, his family, the firefighters, members of the community are going out and distributing gifts to the less fortunate so that they can feel that same holiday spirit. It's those things to where I think success is filling in those gaps for people, because we are a community that has incredible leaders, incredible businesses. And I think it's kind of our duty in a lot of ways to elevate those around us who maybe didn't have the opportunity, who maybe fell upon hard times, who came out of the pandemic and didn't fare as well as some others did. I think there's still a lot of recovery from that when we look at people's living situations, when we look at the cost of living. So if we can kind of help bridge the gap for some people, if that's something that facilitates itself through an organization like Graceway Village, handing out meals to the homeless, whether that's someone, even, I know I had a conversation yesterday with a gentleman and just his local golf tournament for his church. And that, how do we help them, and how do we make sure that's sustainable? How do we make sure that their faith practices are still something that they can continue to do so? Because all these elements, again, I think we kind of alluded to it earlier, but everything is in conversation with the next item. It's so important that people can have these built out communities. And as Port St. Lucie in particular, our immediate home grows, I think it's important that we do as much as we can to still have that small town feel and still have kind of that resonance where you don't feel like you're now just one of 300,000, one of 500,000. You still have people that you know every day, that you see in the grocery store, that you talk with, that you chat with, that you catch up with, organizations that you've been invested with, that you've seen their work grow. I mean, my goodness, look at the school districts now getting their A ranking. Like, that's an amazing thing to
Yeah.
have. So if we can play a part in any of those things, I think we really want to make that effort, and we want to be tied in as much as we can.
Yeah, I think that's a great message, and I think that's a good way to kind of to close things off, where we're not just folks. I mean, it's great to talk about the product and things like that, but it's also important to talk about things like that and what, what, how we get fulfillment beyond just doing what we do at a very high level. And I appreciate you again being on to talk about all this. I want to make sure before we finish up that we tell people, I guess, what, if anything, is coming up next or on the horizon that people can keep their eyes out with AMG, and where they can reach out to you. I mean, I know on your website they can go on, they can schedule a consultation, or what's the best way for someone to reach out to you guys if they are interested in getting a pool?
Well, as you mentioned there, the website is a great resource just because you have the immediacy. We've got pretty open hours, but again, if you feel an inspiration late in the evening, early in the morning, to being able to just file that away and get that into our system allows us to reach out to you sooner. I always will advocate for, don't be afraid to make that phone call. Don't be afraid to just have your questions answered. And it might be a single question that you have. You might be concerned about a certain feature. Maybe it's pricing. Maybe it's what's feasible. Maybe it's a certain material. Do we have that? Don't be afraid to reach out. Our team is always willing and able to answer those questions, regardless of how big or small they may be. In terms of things on the horizon, I would say one of the largest things that we've had really a lot of fun doing is launching our own podcast series that we host through our social media platforms. It's just been a great way to get the stories of individuals who might not be a part of the customer experience. We've talked a lot today about the designers, about the construction team, about the project managers. Those are people who get to have interaction with the customer on a pretty frequent basis. But someone like our permit director, someone like our scheduling coordinator, even Travis himself, being able to sit down and see how they view an AMG. What's their story? How do they view the industry? How do they view our role within the community? I think it's been great to be able to tell those stories as well. And then in terms of projects, there's a lot of really amazing things on the horizon. It seems like the area just continues to expand over and over. Every time that we think everything's built out, they find a new parcel of land. So it's been great to see how creativity has kind of manifested itself, because you get a different challenge with every pool. Every homeowner's different, every lot's different. So even though we come with nearly 40 years of experience, to be able to kind of take that and then start with a blank canvas, start with all of our colors of paint, start with all the textures, and see what we could create from that. It's a pretty amazing thing.
That's awesome, Luke. I appreciate you being on. I appreciate you talking about all this, and I'm glad we were able to cover kind of a big breadth of important things people should consider if they're thinking about getting a pool, but also probably bringing a little bit of personality to AMG Concrete Pools and who they actually are in the community. Because sometimes we look at these brands and we forget that these are actually companies who are, in varying degrees, have different involvement in the community. And I appreciate you guys. I appreciate the product you put out, and I appreciate what you do in the community. So thanks again. Thanks for being on.
Hey, it's a pleasure, and thank you for having me on. And if I could leave any final point, it's we're a product of the community. I mean, you obviously with treasurecoast.com, you're so heavily integrated. We would not be at the standpoint we're at. We would not be one of the top 50 builders in the nation. We would not be an award-winning company in terms of our design if not for the chances given to us by the Treasure Coast community. So for however large we may get, however successful we may be, it is always going to be a product of those families, those individuals who place their trust in us to create the backyard for them. And I don't think we're ever going to forget that. So
that's awesome. Thanks, Luke. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate those final thoughts. I'll talk to you soon, man.
Likewise. Yes, for sure.
That's a wrap for this episode of The Current by TreasureCoast.com. If you enjoyed the conversation, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Follow us on social media or visit TreasureCoast.com for local events, tips, and news. Have a guest or topic you'd love to hear on the show? Let us know at TreasureCoast.com. Until next time, keep riding the current and enjoying everything the Treasure Coast has to offer. See you soon.